Open your Bibles today. We're going to be in two passages, actually. In the book of Joel and the book of John. The page numbers and the references are both in your bulletin. You can find it all also in the Bible app under the events section as well. Growing up, I had a friend whose name was Chris. And Chris was very talented musically. His family actually toured the country playing. And if you knew Chris, he would not want me telling you this because you can still find videos of them coordinating outfits and playing music around the country. A variety of music. Some they wrote, some that were old gospel hymns. But Chris went on to sing, lead singer of a band, and he was actually recently on one of those singing shows on TV, did a good job. And we played basketball together and hang out a lot. But there was one time, Chris, when he was in college, but he was still staying with his parents, we'd been playing ball, and he went home to take a nap. He went upstairs, laid down on the couch, took a nap, and he woke up with excruciating pain in the side of his head. And the pain woke him up. And he woke up and he's grabbing at his head and he's writhing in pain. And he realized it's his ear. And he's sticking his finger in his ear, can't figure out what the problem is. And he's in all kinds of pain. Well, he gets up as any college guy and doesn't want to tell his mommy that he's hurting. And so he acts like everything's okay. And he goes around, tries to do stuff that he had on his mental to-do list to get done, and he couldn't do it because the pain in his head was so bad. And so he finally admits to his mom that he's got this terrible, terrible headache going on just over here on this side of his head, somehow with his ear. And so he takes some pain meds. And the time passes, 30, 45, an hour, and the pain doesn't get any better. It actually gets worse. And he is just screaming in pain. And his mom said, "I don't care about how macho you are. I'm taking you to the doctor right now." So she grabs him, and they jump in the car, and they head to the doctor. And as any of you know, when you go to the doctor, you sit in the waiting room for a long time, and then you go, and they put you in a holding room, or a holding cell, or whatever, and you stay there for a long time. And then the doctor finally comes in, and this whole time, Chris is in pain. I mean, it's getting worse, and it's getting worse, and it's getting worse. He can't hear out of that ear, and it's just getting worse. And the doctor comes in. He can see the tears in Chris's eyes. He can see him as he is physically writhing on the table in pain. And the doctor says, "Something's wrong." And Chris says, "Yes, something is wrong. It's my ear." And so the doctor pulls out that little tool with the light deal on it and shoves it in his ear. And the doctor goes, "Whoa, ho, 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 ho." And he goes over to the cabinet. And that's something you don't want to hear when the doctor's looking at you, by the way. But he goes over to the cabinet and he pulls out some tweezers. And Chris is thinking, "Okay, well, what are you about to do to me now, doctor?" And he shoves that deal back in his ear with those tweezers and begins to pull some things out of Chris's ear. You see, when Chris was asleep, a roach had crawled up and burrowed its way into his ear, so deep that he couldn't get it out. Even sticking his finger in, he couldn't feel it. It was in his ear. Now, just as a side, a P.S., his mom made all of his friends swear never to tell that story because not because she didn't want people knowing her son was in so much pain, but because she didn't want people thinking her house was so dirty that she had roaches crawling all over her kids. But I'm not going to send her this video, and you're not going to tell her, so I'm going to tell it anyway. Chris is watching the doctor pull this thing out of his ear piece by piece and set it in the deal. And you know how you react when there's a roach anyway. But as a doctor's pulling one out of your body, it's a whole new reaction here. You see, he had tried to mask the pain, tried to treat the pain with medicine. And in his case, that was a surface-level solution, and it did not solve the problem. The doctor had to dig below the surface to fix the problem. And they got it out and fixed the problem, and Chris can hear fine today, if you were wondering. He is doing great and still singing and all that. But the doctor did have to dig and dig and dig to get that deal out of there and fix what he had wrong with him. And now here in Joel, the book of Joel, this little prophet, just a few chapters. In chapter 1, some bad things had happened to the nation of Israel, and we looked at it a little bit last week. Some locusts had come. So we just talked about roaches, now we're talking about locusts, and you're all kind of going like that, looking on the floor. You see anything? No? There's a crack in the floor over there. I don't know if something's going to crawl out. Just heads up. And so locusts came to the nation of Israel and destroyed everything. All the crops, all the stuff that they had for their personal finances, the stuff that they used for their jobs was gone. And so the individual financial system broke down, and the national economy was devastated because these locusts, by the hundreds of thousands, swept through the nation and killed everything that they were growing. Well, then in Joel chapter 2, the situation gets worse. The prophet comes on the scene and says, I know everything it has gotten really, really bad because of the locusts. Well, it's going to get worse because an army, the likes of which the world has never seen before, is going to come and is going to devastate the land. What the locusts have destroyed of the land right now will seem like paradise compared to what it's going to be when the army comes and burns everything down to ash and kills everybody in their way. And so the people living there are hearing this, that the locusts have destroyed all this, and now the army's coming, and the situation seems hopeless, seems utterly hopeless. There's no way out. Until we get down to verse 12, and God speaks. So look at Joel chapter 2, verse 12. It says, Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God. Return to me with all your heart. Not just a little bit, not just a tiny little smidge, but the whole kit and caboodle. He says, do it with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. You see, what had happened is the nation of Israel had wandered away from God. They were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. They were worshiping gods they shouldn't have been worshiping. They were living lives that in sin that they should not have been doing. And the thing is, they knew that they shouldn't be doing this stuff. They still, in their minds, they knew the culture they were coming from, a culture of Judaism, a culture of worshiping God at the temple, going there and doing their thing. And some of them still did that. They still lived their lives, doing their sin, doing their stuff, and they would go and do the temple stuff too, just as a cultural action, not because it had any faith behind it. But the others just didn't even bother with that. They just lived the lives the way they were going to live. And so God comes to them and says, you've been devastated, you're in trouble, you have a problem, you're having more problems that are headed your way. Return to me. Come back with all of your heart. He says with fasting. He says give up a little bit of your comfort just for a time period and seek me out. Come and give up the food, and in those moments where you're supposed to be eating, be praying and urgently seeking my heart. And he wants, in that moment, the people understand that the most important thing is seeking out God. Food is important. Food is very important. I love food. If y'all have been going here very long, you know that because I will bring food for sermon illustrations and eat it in front of you right before lunch. And I didn't do that today. I should have, though. Now I'm thinking about lunch. Anyway. He wants them to give up their sustenance for this little bit and focus on seeking his heart. And he says also with mourning and with weeping. You know, weeping over the way they had been living, mourning over the missed opportunities in their lives because they were pursuing their own selfish ambitions as opposed to pursuing what God wanted. He says, rend your hearts and not your garments. Tear your hearts and not your garments. That was a thing that they would do, as some of you know. Many do not. Back in the day when they would get upset or they would experience a terrible, terrible issue or a problem, they would just tear their clothes as an outward sign to everyone around them, I'm going through a bad situation right now. I'm upset about this, that, and the other thing. I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I am grieving over something. A variety of emotions were illustrated when they would tear their clothes. And it showed the people that saw them that they were going through this. And what God is saying here to the people, I know you're going through great difficulty, but don't tear your clothes. Because it's not about other people knowing what you're going through. It's about me, God, knowing what you're going through and being the only source to get you out of it. He says, stop showing off your struggles to other people just to show it off. Come to me and I can help you fix it. Because God had told, actually Samuel, back in the book of Samuel, I mentioned it last week, that the man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. It's about the heart. That is the root of their problem, and many times that is the root of our problems. We want to treat the surface level stuff and have the situation change, but God wants to get to the root of the matter. Rend your hearts, not your garments. Return to the Lord your God. Look at the rest of 13. He says, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster. So we're supposed to return to God because of these characteristics. This is a characteristic of God, these things here. He is gracious, he is merciful, he is patient, he is loving, and he relents over disaster. From sending disaster, from allowing disaster to happen, he can stop it sometimes, or he can stop it anytime he wants, and he does sometimes. But these characteristics of God are something that we may know mentally. And if we really sat down and thought about it, we would know it experientially in our lives because God has been gracious to all of us. God has been merciful to all of us. God's grace is for everyone. No matter who you are or what you've done, His grace is for everybody. But a lot of times we are grace hoarders. We keep it to ourselves and we don't tell anybody about God's grace and we go and live our lives just taking more and more of His grace without spreading it around. But He says, God is a God of grace, of mercy, of great patience. He is slow to anger. He is abounding in steadfast love, and He relents over disaster. Look at verse 14. So He relents over disaster, transitioning right into verse 14. He says, who knows whether He will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind Him, a grain offering and a drink offering for the Lord your God. So God, speaking through the prophet Joel to the people of Israel, going through great problems and difficulties, God tells them, come back to me, come back to being a pursuant of my grace and my mercy and see what happens. You see, we've been talking about last week and this week about your comeback story, about coming back from whatever problem or difficulty you're facing. But your comeback story begins when you come back to the Lord. Your comeback starts when you come back, or come in the first place. And so we see here, he says, if you come back, you will receive a blessing from the Lord. Now, he doesn't specify what kind of blessing that is. It can take many forms. A lot of times when people think a blessing from God, they're speaking financially. God will bless me financially, and I'm going to go and I'm going to check my bank app after church, and I'm going to have an extra $1 million. Thank you, Jesus. That means God loves me. You need a tithe on that if that happens, by the way. But he says here that he will leave a blessing behind him. And then he says a grain offering and a drink offering for the Lord your God. So that whatever God blesses us with, however it takes form, takes shape in our lives, we're supposed to utilize that for God's benefit. That the blessing God blesses us with is for our benefit and to help us, but we're supposed to use it for the Lord. And if we don't, we're squandering what He has blessed us with. So he says, return to me, come back to me, and there will be a blessing. Because Jesus wants to bless, not distress. He wants to encourage. He wants to lift up. But if we're not willing to return to Him, if we want this relationship with Jesus to be one-sided, that's not the way it is supposed to work. His grace is enough to save us without us doing anything. That's the point. We can't gain salvation on our own. But from that point forward, if we truly embrace the grace of Jesus, we're supposed to live like it. And not live pursuing our own agendas and our own purposes for our own benefits, ignoring the things of God. Because that's what got Israel into this mess. Pursuing their own wants and desires and ignoring the God who rescued them over and over again. I want you to look with me in John chapter 5. You see, because here in Joel chapter 2, the people had a history of dealing with their own problems on their own. And over in John chapter 5, we've got a guy who was worried about maintaining his plan for addressing his particular problem, even though that his plan would not ultimately fix that problem. See, John chapter 5, Jesus is going to come across a guy who's been dealing with a lot of issues, as most of us do. Jesus is headed into Jerusalem, and he passes a very interesting scene. John chapter 5, Look at verse 2. He says, "Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed." Now, archaeologists have since found what seems to be the remnants of this place. There was a big pool of water right outside the city, and around this pool was a covered porch that went all around 4 sides, and then a covered bridge that went across the middle. And the cover over the porch was supported by columns. And so he says, it had 5 colonnades, and that's what that is, around the sides, around the middle. And these people, these invalids, what John writes here, were there. The blind, the lame, and the paralyzed would set themselves up under these covered porches. And they had this superstition that they believed an angel would come down from God, would stick his hand in the water and stir it up. So that whenever the water stirred or there was movement in the water, the first guy or girl who's sitting under those porches that was able to get totally in the water, that person would be healed, magically healed by the angel that stirs the water. And so all these people were there. And they'd get there every day and just wait for it to happen, wait for the water to move. Again, archaeologists in excavating this area have discovered a spring that was under this particular area that would send water bubbles up and make the thing bubble, and the people would see that. And so these people are waiting for the stirring of the waters, the movement of the waters. And Jesus comes across this scene. Now, what's even more fascinating is typically people of Jesus' stature, rabbis, guys of his societal level, would not go near this spot. Because these are people who are not really pursuing God, they're pursuing superstition in doing this thing. And they're sitting out there all day in their sick, in their mess, and rabbis would not want to go near that because it's just gross and it stinks and it's just disgusting. But Jesus isn't a typical guy. Jesus intentionally went to that side of Jerusalem and walks up to that particular place looking for a specific man. Look at verse 5. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. So we've got a guy now that this is the guy Jesus is looking for. He's been in his condition, dealing with his problem for 38 years. Which life expectancy then was in the 40-year-olds and 50-year-old range. And so this guy has been in his condition for nearly the entire length of life expectancy during that day and time. And he's there and he's dealing with his issue. And Jesus makes a beeline for this guy. Jesus passes all these other sick people and walks straight up to this guy. Verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" And that's the point of this whole passage. Do you want to be healed? Now, the answer is, yes, Jesus. I'm sitting here by a pool with a bunch of sick people, and that's what this pool is for. Everybody knows it. Yes, I want to be healed. But Jesus is asking a multi-layered question. It addresses the physical needs of the man, as Jesus is about to do, but it also addresses the spiritual needs of the man, as Jesus does later on when he encounters the man in the temple. He says, do you want to be healed? Do you really want to be healed? Look at the man's response. The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one." Before we go on with the rest of the verse, I just want you to think about that for a sec. That's his initial response to Jesus. Jesus said, "Do you want to be healed?" And the man says, "I have no one. I've got nobody. I'm here by the pool, and I've got no one." He says, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, another steps down before me." So the man doesn't answer Jesus' question. Jesus said, "Do you want to be healed?" And the man said, "I've got no one to help me in the water. When I try to get in the water, somebody else jumps in front of me. I've got no family here coming to help me. I've got no friends here coming to help me. I've not got no good Samaritans." Now, they didn't use that term back then because Samaritans they thought bad guys. But he says, "I've got nobody to help me get into the water. The water's the only way I think I can be healed. This is the only plan of action I've got. I've consulted the doctors. They don't know anything. They can't heal me. And so I've come here to try to get fixed. And I can't get in the water because nobody will help me. It's their fault for not being here and help me. They don't love me enough. They don't care about me enough. And I can't get in the water. And on top of that, when I finally get up enough energy to try to roll in the water, these other terrible, terrible people won't let me get in. Somebody else jumps right in front of me and cuts the line. These jerks, they won't just let me fall in the water. I just can't get in. And so this guy is blaming a lot of other people for his condition. You know, if you really look at the root of what he's talking about, he wants his situation to change. He wants his problem to be fixed. He wants people to care about him. He wants the people around him to look at his situation and allow him to get in. He's saying, I am worse off than them. I should be able to do this. I want my situation to be fixed. And this is the only way I foresee the situation being fixed. Now, I don't know if you know of anybody in your life who thinks that whatever problem they're going through, they have it worse off than everybody else. All of us think we have it worse off than everybody else. You know, there's times we say, you know, I've got this and I've got that person doesn't even have this and they won't do what I'm doing. I mean, my life is way worse than that person and my health is worse than them and I've got this situation and that situation. My life is just terrible compared to them and they need to just get it together, man, and just do what I'm doing and I'm worse. The thing is, we've all got problems from whatever perspective you look at it. We've all got issues and we've all got to deal with them. And Jesus is the only way to get through them onto something else. It's not necessarily about the pile that you have on your back. It's about how much you rely on Jesus in the midst of your pile. This man blaming everybody else for his condition, for his situation, wanting to change his circumstance. Well, what Jesus is about to do, Jesus doesn't want to change the man's circumstance. Jesus doesn't want to change the man's situation. Jesus is going to change something else. Look at verse 8. Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and he walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. Jesus didn't want to change the man's situation. Jesus wanted to change the man. Jesus wanted to change the man. He thought this pool is the only way out of my circumstance. This plan that I have set up to come here day after day, year after year, decade after decade to do this thing is the only way this can be fixed. When this true solution is standing right in front of him and he says, "Do you want to be healed?" And the man doesn't answer him. And Jesus says, "Fine, I'll do it for you. I will heal you right now for your benefit and for the benefit of everyone watching, that the only true way out, not necessarily out, but through the problem, is with me." You see, we look at our circumstances and our situations in our lives, and we do it in our thought processes, and honestly, we do it in our prayers. And we want to get out of our situation. We want to get out of our circumstance. Do this, God, get me out of this, eradicate this situation, God, fix my spouse because they're screwed up. That's what Katie prays, not what I pray. I mean, she's perfect, I'm screwed up. But and fix my job because my boss is nuts, and you just need to change him. Change my boss. I mean, just get rid of him, give me another one. God, fix this, fix my kids, fix my parents, fix my friends, fix my health, fix this, fix that, fix the other thing. And we want God just to completely overhaul our entire situation and circumstance. And we never address our own hearts in the process. Let me suggest to you, perhaps Jesus might want to change you before he changes your situation. Jesus might want to change you first. He might want to change you instead of your situation. We've got to get right with God before the surface level stuff gets fixed. And the surface level stuff feels deep. Feels like that bug boring into our brain. But what God said in Joel, what Jesus addressed with this man, is there is something more important here. Your heart. What you've got going on within you, you've got to get it right. You've got to get it fixed. That doesn't necessarily mean that the problems you have in your life are going to go away when you get right with God. The problems may persist, but the way you address the problems won't be the same. You see, even though your problems might not go away, a spiritual heart transplant removes your problem's power over you. We feel like these problems we have, these situations, these circumstances have this massive power over us, and it's weighing down on us, and it feels crippling at times. Whatever the issue is and the problem is and the frustrating situation and the health deal, we feel like it's got this crazy power over us. And it does when we allow it, when we focus on that thing and put our attention, just like the man in John 5. He's putting his entire attention on the pool of water there and ignoring Jesus, the one who ultimately heals him. Where are you putting your attention? Where are you putting your focus? Are you totally focusing on the problem and your reasoning for a solution when you need to turn to Jesus? Have a heart transplant and watch what he can do with that. Remove the problem's power over you. You see, an encounter with the presence of God, like Joel was begging the Israelites to do, like this man by this pool had. He had an encounter with God. He had an experience with Jesus. An encounter with the presence of God may not remove your problem, but it cannot help but change your perspective. If you have genuinely encountered Jesus in the midst of your problem, you cannot help but change how you see it, because your heart's been changed, because now you're cruising along at Jesus' speed and not yours. The problem may still persist, may still be there, may still be nagging, but you're not doing it on your own anymore. You're doing it with him. You see, and until we focus on Jesus and we point to Jesus and we have the realization Jesus has made a beeline for each and every one of us in the midst of our mess, in the midst of our sick, in the midst of our distress and problems, he has pursued us and given us an offer of salvation and deliverance. And if we don't know him, we don't take his offer. And we try to live on our own, and we try to do it on our own, and we miss out. And we're like the man sitting there by the pool for decades and decades, insisting that this is the only way to experience deliverance. When Jesus says, no, that's not the way. That's just water. I made that. I am the way and the truth and the life. You got to believe. And so if you're here and you don't have that deliverance, you don't have that peace, you may even have the head knowledge like the people in Joel. You may know that this is, I know about church and I know about God and Jesus, okay, he died and rose from the dead, all that jazz. But if you haven't made him the Lord of your life, you haven't put him in charge of you, then you're still missing out on the great opportunity he's given us. You've got to believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead for you. And that gives you access to heaven. That gives you access to his power. That gives you access to his strength that removes your problem's power over you. And we've all got problems. God, this week when I was going over this passage, God preached this to me. In the midst of a problem this week, I'm feeling overwhelmed, digging into this, and God said, hey, you're telling the people this deal and you're not even applying it to yourself. I had to say, okay, yeah, you're right, God. I need to preach this to myself. And I did about 4 or 5 times before I even got out here today. This is a message for all of us. That the problem you have, though external and though may be massive, and I may have no idea what you're going through, that's true. But Jesus does. And he is the one who can help you get through it. Because this life, for each and every one of us, is only going to last a season. It's only going to last for a period of time. And we're going to live in eternity. And all this surface level stuff will be gone. And will you have done anything of eternal value between now and then? Or will you have spent all your time focused on the problem and focused on the pool that you think will get you out and missed Jesus standing there with his hands extended, offering your help? Him asking the question, do you want to be healed? And so today, if you don't know him, that's him asking you. I'm inviting you to come to know him. Do you want to be healed eternally from the problems you got? And if you know him today, do you want to be healed? Do you want his help in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the problem? Do you want him to help you get through it? Not necessarily out of it, but through it. Because if you do it on your own, it's going to weigh you down and destroy you. You need Jesus. And so that's really the message. In a nutshell, 3 words. Whether it's for the first time or you just need to be reminded daily, as I do. Come to Jesus. Don't come to yourself in your own mind and your own reasoning, although God did give us a brain for a purpose. But if we use it without him, we're using it without purpose. But come to Jesus. Come to know him now. Come to Jesus. Help him so that he can rescue you in the midst of your pain and your problems and the thing boring into your brain. Because he can dig below the surface, get to the root of the matter, clean out your heart, and then work his way out into the rest of your life. So 2 questions. Do you want to be healed? And will you come to Jesus?